Well, I am very excited to introduce Marie Mohr. We met this past year at a interprofessional education program, and I was really excited to learn about the work that she is doing with teaching communication to caregivers using the techniques related to drama. And Anne Marie has been working in she was the art in the, she has an MA in drama and has been working in our School of Drama, teaching embodied communication and improvisational courses, but also has started a business to apply this to care of caregivers. And I will let her talk about this exciting work.
Great.
Take it from here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to quickly share my screen here. Yes. One moment. Sorry, we practiced this and it worked beautifully. All right, there we go. So, is that good for everyone?
Yes, looks great.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We're just going to take a moment to breathe because we're all coming from different things. So we have this little picture here. So let's just take a moment to breathe. All right, please continue breathing, but we're going to get started. Welcome all. My name is Marie Mohr, like was mentioned, and today we're here to sort of talk about communication, creativity, and connection to improve the quality of life for those impacted by dementia. Like Ellen said, I teach on the Danforth campus. I teach communication, acting, and improvisation courses. And I also have Project Present. It is a 501c3 nonprofit here whose, let me share the mission, is to improve the quality of life for both caregivers and individuals living with dementia. We strive to improve communication, enhance connection, reduce stress, foster creative problem solving, cultivate creativity, and promote joyful collaboration. So there's a lot of things we're striving to do with this in this organization. And what I kind of love is that the Friedman Center kind of goes back a bit to its inception. So to understand a little bit the history of Project Present, I've had another business for a long time where I would go into different organizations and groups, and I would work with them to sort of build communication skills and collaborative practices. Some of you might be familiar with Memory Care Home Solutions. It's a nonprofit here in St. Louis, an amazing organization. And they had hired me years ago to come in and work with their staff and their team on sort of these collaborative and communication processes. And afterwards, one of the directors had asked, have you ever thought about this work in relation to caregiving? And I sort of think about how this work applies to so many different groups or any time that humans are together. But this is one group I had not thought about. And I became weirdly obsessed with sort of seeing what was being done, if anything was being done, and how it could be applied. And so I saw that Northwestern University was doing some interesting things and reached out to them and had some good conversations on what was being done there. There was an improviser who had her parents with Alzheimer's and was using some interesting things based in improvisation. And so I went back to Memory Care Home Solutions and started having conversations with them. And they graciously we worked on a grant together after I developed some programming and put together a grant and started doing the work that I had created. So in this great partnership with them. And so it's one of the first things we did, though, we did present at the Friedman Center for Aging. I think it was in around 2018. So it's fun being back, kind of a different platform, but it's kind of coming full circle. So that gives you just a brief bit of history of the work being started from going down one road and then taking off onto another turn. So like I said, now it is an official 501c3 for about the last 4 or 5 years. And we offer quite a few different things. So the things I'm going to focus on today, kind of talking to you about, is more the first two things. So you'll see the communication training and the improv sessions. We'll focus on those. But Project Present also offers support groups. And what I think is sort of unique about those is not only do we offer them Zoom and in person, but we always follow up with what was specifically talked about in that session. So after we have a meeting and people might bring up challenges or books they want to recommend or resources, I kind of go back and I tailor a newsletter each time we meet to the whole group, sharing the information collected from that specific support group. And then it goes out to the entire group. So if someone were to miss, they have all of these resources together and the conversations that were had in one place. We also use some interesting strategies that you'll learn about when we start talking about the communication training to sort of navigate some of the challenges that individuals might be facing. We offer family immersive training. So that is where we will go into a family and we'll work to kind of help everyone get on the same page, using the same language, understanding the disease that the individual is impacted by, and how best individuals can communicate, really trying to get people on the same page in understanding and how best to sort of navigate situations, to really talk, sometimes to have this outside party come in to help, negotiate, navigate, and really give individuals more tools and strategies to use to really reduce that stress and sort of improve those challenging situations that may exist to overall improve the quality of life within the family. And then lastly, we offer the professional sort of training. We work with, professional caregivers in different communities, as well as social workers, nurses, and other individuals to kind of work with them on different ways of communicating and giving more tools to be even more effective at what individuals are already doing. So those are things that we offer. So we're gonna talk about the root of all of this. I think I've mentioned the word improvisation a couple of times, and that can be a word that is terrifying, right? For a lot of people, that word invokes fear. They want to go throw up. I walk in, they want to leave, right? And I understand, because it is sort of can induce terror by being on the spot in the moment. We think of performance having to be funny, but I really want to stress the words applied, and especially when that comes to sort of caregiving, that we're looking at the application of these guidelines to be more effective at doing what caregivers are already doing. As we know, when an individual is caregiving, they are improvising all day, every day, because Alzheimer's, dementia, all of these things are not consistent sort of diseases and things that just lay out very simply. Moment to moment, things can change. And so caregivers are naturally improvising. So what we're trying to do is give them tools to enhance what they're already doing. So more strategies, more effective ways to understand how to navigate with what they're already doing. And these 5 guidelines kind of work in the realm of the performance of doing improv, but they also really work when we think about how we can, communicate and relate to others. So I used to have about a bazillion different sort of guidelines, but I've narrowed them down to 5. And the first is to get out of your head. And we want to really focus thinking about the caregiver, getting out of your head. That is a place where caregivers are stuck. I mean, we all are stuck there. We have worries, doubt, guilt. We're thinking about this. Did I do that right? Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Now I feel this. And when we get stuck up here, we oftentimes start spiraling. There's that ruminating that can happen. And it's really not serving the individual or the person that they're caring for. So I wish that I could just get people out of their heads, but it's a lot harder than that. But I think the first step is just raising awareness. When we get ourselves up here and when we see ourselves kind of consumed by thoughts, by worry, by guilt, we have to just raise that awareness and allow ourselves to try to bring ourselves to the present, because we're not really serving ourselves or anyone when we are in a place where we really can't control some of the things that are going on. So we like to bring the individual back to the present moment. And that's where we're most effective, in the moment we're in. We also know that being present really helps us be more engaged and focused in connection with others. I mean, I think we all know when someone is present, when someone is connected with us, and when they're not, when they're off on their phone and like, huh, what? You know, there's a big difference when we have that sort of presence. And so we really want to focus on that ability to be present. And I know it's impossible, right, to do this all of the time, but when we are really trying to be more effective at communication or effective at connecting with others, these are useful tools and strategies. And then when we're there, we want to make sure that we are actively listening. So not only do we listen to the words, but we really need to think about listening more about our nonverbals, right? Our facial expressions, our body language, our posture, all of those things are key, especially when we are dealing with an individual with Alzheimer's or dementia. As language perhaps ceases, we still can communicate, and we need to realize that. In fact, I think studies say we communicate, there's a range, but say 70% is nonverbal. We don't think about that as much as we should, right? We don't think about what we're offering with our own nonverbals and sharing, but we also sometimes don't also look at what others are offering us. I had a gentleman, a caregiver that I worked with for years, and his wife, she developed, her own language. And in improv, we say gibberish, but she had her own language that she was speaking. And he kept coming back to the group and he said, well, I can't talk to her anymore. She speaks this other language. And so it was really, he felt like it was kind of over their ability to communicate. And so what we tried to think about is that she's still communicating and she's trying to communicate, and he needs to maybe look at it a little differently. So we started kind of looking at the pace, the energy, the facial expression, the body language that she was offering in connection to this language that he couldn't understand, but he could read what emotionally she was sharing. And he had then the power, when she was perhaps agitated or upset, to say, I see you're upset. I'm sorry you're sad. Oh, you're very excited. So that observation and validation of what he was seeing in the other is really, really powerful. And that is a way to keep connecting and to keep communicating. So a big part of what I want us to think about is the importance of nonverbal communication in both what we offer as well as what we see in the other. And then we move into really what's considered sort of the crux or the core of improvisation, and that is yes and. And yes and is really all about accept and build, right? So we accept what someone offers us and we build on that. In an improv scene, let's say I'm doing an improv scene with a partner and my partner says to me, oh, you have a tarantula on your sweater. And if I look down and I'm like, no, I don't. Well, wah, 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 right? That kind of kills the seed. My partner's left feeling kind of, doesn't trust. We haven't moved anywhere. It's awkward, right? And so what could be more effective is using yes and. So if my partner says, there's a tarantula on your sweater, and if I say, oh, yes, that's Barnaby, and he's my pet, I bring him with me everywhere. Very friendly. All right. So what happens there is now we're moving somewhere. I've accepted and I've built on an idea. We've created trust and connection. And this applies, right, to caregiving and to working with others. So when an individual with dementia is living within their reality, it's important to think about how we can yes and accept and build on what they're offering us. A lot of times working with caregivers, they feel like, I don't want to lie, I don't want to fib. There's the reality orientation where we're trying to bring the person back to reality. That's really, we know, doesn't work, because the truth for the individual is their truth, and that is their reality. So we, as a caregiver, can step in and accept and build upon that reality, and it can be a lot more successful in sort of navigating situations. And we'll dive into that a little bit further. And then the last guideline is to make others look good. And really that's about maintaining integrity of other, really having others' best interest. When we maintain integrity of other, we feel really good about ourselves, and ultimately it makes other feel good as well. So I think really thinking about from the foundation, the choices and things that we're doing are for the best interest of the other individual. So those are the guidelines. And like I said, those can be rooted in the caregiving process, but they're also rooted in just the improv as play process that we also do at Project Present. So we're going to start thinking and looking at a little bit about, these applied improv guidelines for caregivers and why we have them and what we can do with them. So like I mentioned before, the big piece is to acquire a new set of tools. Caregivers are improvising already. So we just want to give them a sense and practice in doing something that they are already doing, but having more tools to do it so that they can foster flexibility, to learn to, let go a bit and give up control. I think that's a part that can be very difficult for individuals, is that sense of control. And when having this disease within your life, a lot of control has been taken away. So sometimes we try to hold on to things so that we have some control, and it can be challenging to let go. I know I had a woman, I was a caregiver, and her husband, they would go to the gym. It was great. They would go work out, but he always wanted to wear his dress-up clothes. And she had battle after battle after battle saying he couldn't wear these dress-up clothes. She wanted him, to be in gym clothes. And finally, she sort of let that go. But it's not easy, right, to let go of control, because it's something that makes us feel more comfort and safe when we feel we can control. But ultimately, when we practice the ability to sort of be more present and spontaneous and flexible, it can ease some of the challenges and tensions that exist. Obviously, there's times and places where we need to make sure, for safety's sake, that we have to have the control, but other, battles we don't always have to fight. We then move into that nonverbal communication. Like I said, we really want to strengthen those skills. So in these sessions, we really practice using nonverbals, reading others' nonverbals, how we can communicate most effectively, because we know that language and things change. So how can we be more able to connect with someone without having to rely so much on language, just the words? And then we're accepting another's reality through yes and. So this is a big part. A person with dementia is told no a lot, right? Nope, you can't drive anymore. No, you can't do that. No, you have to do this. And that can create a lot of tension. It can create frustration. And so we are using yes and as a way of sort of accepting on what's being said and building. Another caregiver story, a woman and her husband had Alzheimer's, would be sitting in their family room. And it was night after night. He kept saying how he loved sitting on the beaches of Alabama. And she kept telling him, we're in our living room, we're not in the beaches of Alabama. And he would get frustrated. It just was kind of that similar cycle of frustration by both, until she sort of decided to yes and accept, and just was on the beaches with her husband. And it was much more lovely, right, than having a battle over where they were. So she was able to sort of yes and that situation. And that can come in, we use this also in diffusing challenging situations. So for example, your loved one with dementia wants to drive, they're no longer allowed to drive, right? So instead of saying, no, you can't drive, and then an argument might ensue, or, it can get more difficult, you can perhaps use the yes and in a way. You can say, oh yes, we do need to go to the grocery store. And first, we should make a list. Let's go into the kitchen and let's get some tea, and we'll make a list of the things we need. So, right, we use these methods of validating, redirecting, and distracting, but the language of yes and can really be a helpful tool to carry us there. All of these things, right, are not perfect. They're just additional tools and strategies that you can use to apply to caring to help. Because it is always, like we've talked about, like I talk about with all my caregivers, is the inconsistency. This might work one day, but not the next. And that's why we need to think about creativity. Caring is a creative process. And a lot of times I come into groups, they're like, well, I'm not creative. I'm not creative at all. And so we really need to allow people to understand that they are. So an exercise we might do is like right here, right? I have this pen, and we all might look at it as a pen. Same thing when we're dealing with, a problem when caring. Your loved one won't take their meds. And so we think, well, we can either do this or this. It's either black or white. We're very simple and maybe perhaps trying to solve this issue. But in the case of the pen, I will, with a group of caregivers, say, let's look at this pen, and now we're going to pass it around, and you can use it as anything but a pen. So right now, you all can look at this pen and think, maybe if for a moment you're thinking, what? I don't know. But then all of a sudden, you might be, playing a violin, doing your five, putting on an earring, doing lipstick, right? So we pass it around, and it's amazing how everyone can look at this one pen and see so many different things. And I think that's a value when we're looking at a challenging situation, that it isn't just A or B, as we know, that we might get down to P, that we might sometimes have to get to Z, but we have that potential and that creativity, and we practice that so that we have that faith in ourselves. So that's a kind of a big process, a part of the process, I should say, of what we do in these communication trainings is giving people the ability to sort of tap into their own creativity, because it is a creative process when you're caring for an individual. Now we'll do a little sampling here too. So we kind of look also and understand some of communication strategies that we can use to be more effective. The first, right, is to slow down, which makes sense, not only with our language, but with our actions. You might be going from the kitchen to this room doing and trying to communicate something to an individual. It's not going to be received as effectively as if you slow yourself down and what you're saying down so that you can really connect. And then making sure that you can be as specific as possible and keeping it simple. I tend to be an over-explainer, right? I'll give a direction and I layer on so much to that direction that's really unnecessary. So trying to keep things specific and simple can be quite helpful. Because I think one major note that people really need to be aware of is, right, we understand that the processing time for someone living with Alzheimer's or dementia really can slow down. And I think I see that in times a lot of my caregivers, that's a hard thing to recognize because they're operating very quickly, or their mind can work at a pace that's going whereas the person they might be caring for, their processing time can take a lot longer. I was at a conference once and this really resonated. So I'm going to take my phone here, and the woman gave us a direction, and she said, as if you have dementia, I'm going to ask you to go put on your coat. And she wanted to show about processing time. So she gave the direction, which I'm going to give you all. Go put on your coat. You don't need to do this, but we're going to see what it feels like. That's 15 seconds. That's a minute. I don't know about you all, but that really felt like an eternity to me. I kept wanting to almost interrupt myself and move on, which was obviously not a part of that lesson that I'm trying to show. But that gives us a sense of when we ask someone to get on their coat, the processing time can be so much. It can take a long time, the point is, right? And so I think what happens as a caregiver, what we want to do is kind of say it again. Oh, your coat, it's in the front closet. You need to go put it on. Well, guess what happens? Then we have to go back. The individual needs to then reprocess this new set of commands that you've just given. And it's a very complicated command. We take for granted, go get on your coat. Right now, I imagine all of us could go get on our coats very easily, but there's a lot of steps involved in that. First, I have to remember, like, stand up. I have to then move. I have to know where my coat is. I have to find my coat within the space. I have to then take it off of whatever, put it on. I mean, there's lots of steps that are in that one simple action. And so I think when we start thinking about how complicated tasks are and how time is really different and processing is also very different. So I stress to caregivers, if they feel the need to repeat the exact same way so that they're receiving the same message, that it's not new input, that it's the same. And when communicating, really think about communicating eye to eye, right? We want to, if we can, make sure that we're able to connect with the person, speaking and gesturing face to face, making that connection. That will be much stronger than, say, standing above the person, looking down, being in another room, hollering in, right? If we can connect, that's really the best way to allow a message to land on the individual. And sometimes with, say, the coat, sometimes we can just mirror the desired outcome. So we do a lot of mirroring in our sessions to understand the power of how we can lead and mirror what desired outcome we want. So perhaps I go with the individual, we're going to put on our coats, we walk together, we get the coats, and then the individual is able to mirror the activity with us. It can be the same for perhaps taking medicine, that if you need to take a vitamin and the person's taking medicine, that we do it together, that you show, and there is a mirror that happens with very simple instructions. Putting on shoes, whatever it might be, mirroring the desired outcome with the individual is helpful. When you don't perhaps want to wait the time, if processing time is getting you frustrated, sometimes it can help to sort of mirror and do the activity with the person as well. And then lastly, we can use mirroring also for emotional. Like I mentioned the caregiver earlier, the husband, how he learned how to sort of mirror the emotion of his wife so that he could validate and show that he understood and could hear what she was trying to say. This is very powerful. Some people inherently are great at this, right? So if you're sad, they can really reflect that. And so they're validating by sort of mirroring your expression of sadness, excitement, same way. Other people have to work at that and think of how can I mirror that to show that I am validating what the person, providing comfort in the other by that mirroring. So we can use the mirroring also just to label what we see, because that allows then the individual to be sort of heard and seen in what they are feeling. And that is very powerful to be able to do. And that is another way we can use the mirroring. I think ultimately, just sort of wrapping up a little bit, right, in a nutshell, some of the communication strategies and what we like to think about is that mood and attitude, right, are contagious. So as a caregiver, we always have to really recognize how we're doing. So a lot of the work we do is really trying to help caregivers find ways to have that finding more peace, finding more presence, hence the breathing at the beginning. Caregivers don't have hours to go like take a yoga class or do this. So we tend to use breathing as a tool to help take us from a place of perhaps frustration or whatever it might be to a place of calm. We do the bathroom trick where you go into the bathroom and close the door for 30 seconds to a minute, and we learn how to use this diaphragmatic breathing. We do loads of different breathing exercises to teach individuals how to sort of help themselves get to a place of a little bit more calm and a little more presence. So that mood and attitude really are contagious to others. But what we want to think about when we are caring is that oftentimes what we need to ask ourselves is the person that I'm caring for, are they feeling safe, secure? Are they feeling valued or heard? And if something is missing, there's ways to navigate that, right? If we're noticing that the person is, shadowing, like following you around, perhaps they're not feeling safe. So we can use a mantra, talking to them, saying, you are safe, you are safe. There's lots of different ways that we can navigate, but I think those are good starting places to when we're dealing with some challenging situations, to discover? Is the environment too chaotic? Are the grandkids like screaming? Is the TV on too loud? Are the lights too bright? Whatever it might be, sometimes we can observe that and then see that the person might not have been feeling very safe in that environment. Maybe they're not feeling anyone is recognizing their emotional state, that they're not feeling sort of valued or heard in that moment. So you can say, I see that you're frustrated or upset. And that can really help with those situations. All right, we're gonna transition here though into now a little bit about improv as using it within a group. So having a group come together and do improv. So some of the reasons we like to look at is that oftentimes individuals in those early into the mid stages of Alzheimer's or dementia, right? We see feelings of depression, we see isolation happening, feelings of inadequacy, all of these things coming together. And these are some emotions also, right, that we see being shared by caregivers as well. So an improv session, what we try to do is have it be the counter to that, right? It is an opportunity to bring people together for a joyful shared experience. And that is the ultimate goal of bringing folks together. And we call it like, it's the antidote to some things, right? When you come in, there are no mistakes. Everything you say is brilliant. We yes and everything. And we look at it as like a non-pharmacological approach to improving mood, right? So we want people to just kind of naturally enjoy and improve their mood through the experience of being with other humans in this very positive environment, right? It's all about the present. So there's no memory required. It's all in the moment, everything that's taking place. So no memory is necessary. We have loads of laughter, laughing all the time. And we're building this creative, collaborative community of individuals. So how, just to give you, you can picture this, an improv session. We would be sitting in a circle, everyone would introduce themselves, just say their name. And then we do what we call like our actor or improv warm-up. So once again, I'm all about the breathing. We start off with a breathing exercise, and then we move into some different, stretches all together as a group. And then we do a vocal. So we do some tongue twisters all together. So the group does that. And then we move into a series of nonverbal exercises. So for example, if all of us were to play, I might, pull out this. So this is, I don't know if you guys can all see it. This is my focus ball. And so what in the group we would do is I would, look at one of my friends in the circle and I throw the ball, they catch it, they throw it to someone else. And so we're, throwing around this ball as a group. But we have loads of different nonverbal sort of exercises that we can do together. And then we move into verbal, and always yes-anding is part of it. And then we end our group with everyone gets an imaginary present, and we open those and sort of end the session that way. These groups can oftentimes are both caregivers as well as individuals living with Alzheimer's or dementia. And the beautiful thing about that is when you bring together, say a husband and wife that sometimes, are dealing or navigating the disease together, it's just an opportunity for a really joyful shared experience, right? We're all there together, everyone is connecting, like I said, no mistakes. And so there really is an opportunity to just have a very positive experience. And so, yeah, these sessions are fun. I have to say, I go in, sometimes I'm coming from something and I can be in a mood, and then I do a session and afterwards I'm in a very different place. So these are our improv sessions that we offer. And what we, how we sort of are measuring things, how we're like looking at some of the work is that we have caregiver surveys that we use. And those surveys are an opportunity to measure sort of knowledge, the building of confidence, as well as the application of these skills and tools that they're learning. And then what we also want to make sure we offer is the opportunity not to like go to these communication trainings and then be on your own, because it's a very collaborative sort of environment, but we then offer the ability, if people are wanting to join the support groups and continue having a community to connect with, that is a big part as well, or just receive sort of those bi-monthly newsletters, or twice a month newsletters as well. And then we kind of model after Northwestern University, the Yang Smiley Face Scale. They were the ones that sort of used that with their memory ensemble program, and I've just adopted that as well. So when individuals come into an improv session, they will fill out what they're feeling. The scale is actually 5 faces. It's very simple so that everyone can kind of be able to kind of read what one of the 5 emotions they point to, and then when they leave, they point to the other emotion that they're feeling at that point, or the same emotion if it is. What I think is really awesome is that we do see this real improvement of mood or maintaining mood. We really have never seen someone's mood decline. So that, I think, is a real exciting plus, is that the experience is really positive and does promote a really positive a mood or emotion in individuals that participate. So on that, I think I am I need to wrap up here. I was ending with some breathing so everyone can take in a nice deep breath and let it out, and then we can turn it over to some questions I'd be happy to answer. I'm going to stop sharing and chat.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. All right, yeah, we will turn it over for any questions or comments. If you have any, feel free to put them in the chat, which you can find on your main Zoom menu, or if you would like to just unmute, you can come off camera too, or if you just want to unmute yourself and you can ask your question out loud. So I will just give it a second to see if we have any questions so far.
What have you seen that caregivers struggled with?
I think a big struggle for caregivers, a lot is navigating driving. The car is kind of a consistent struggle that they navigate. Also, like I kind of mentioned before, the medicine taking is also a challenge. I think those are ones that kind of get brought up most frequently.
And I mean in the program, like in participation.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry. Yeah, I think it's, just sort of jumping in. I try to build slowly, right? Because I say it's very participatory, because what we're trying to do is build comfort in the uncomfortable. It is, I think, navigating the disease, caring for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia is not a comfortable place. And so what we're trying to do is sort of build that confidence. So in the program, we, do lots of exercises, because I think we learn through doing. If I just talk at you, you don't take as much in as if you experience the exercises and practice them. So you do see people, like I said, I think I'm not creative. I think that's the thing, that people are a little nervous to jump in and try, but it's amazing when you start non-verbally, which I always start with, it builds confidence. And so people then are willing to sort of transition into the work. So I think it's how you sort of, right, the framing, the scaffolding of the exercises makes all the difference. Because I know if I jump in more heavy language oriented, people are more nervous, but feel a little more comfortable when we start non-verbally.
Great, thanks. And we did have a comment earlier when you were talking about communication strategies and how, to take things slow, and then also keeping them simple. And so somebody also commented that this strategy applies when giving directions to young children. So I think we often find that a lot of these strategies you're talking about could be for caregivers across the gamut, whether it be just caregivers dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's, or other ages and other things as well.
Right. And well, those 5 guidelines too, we talked about, like getting out of your head, the presence. A lot of times this resonates with parents of teenagers, they'll be like, I need to use this with my teen, right? So I think these are actually can be applied and used. I work in lots of different settings, and these are the guidelines that are used within all of those sort of different settings. So I think, yeah, whoever mentioned that is absolutely right.
Lisa, did you want to add on to that?
I just wanted to, it's interesting, most of my professional life has been working with young children. And so it just resonates when I hear you say, and you count out the 60 seconds, because by then most of us will have repeated the direction 5 or 6 times with increasing levels of frustration. I guess I am, in my role at WashU, I support families who are caring for aging parents, parents or spouses who have dementia, but I'm also the child of a mother who has dementia. And I get the yes, and I keep working on it. The place where it's hard for me is when the delusion that she's in the middle of is upsetting to her. So, when she's saying, why hasn't your father called me? Well, he's been dead for 7 years. And so, it's hard for me to join her in that reality when it's upsetting to her. And I feel like I don't have an and. The best I've come up with for that particular situation is that, Mama, if he could be here, I'm sure he would. But I mean, here's another example. Yesterday, she was going on and on and on about a wedding that was supposed to happen that didn't happen. And what was I going to do about that? And she was just very upset. And yeah. So I don't know. You don't need to answer that. This is my specific dilemma, but I just feel like it's the yes and is easier. If someone thinks they're on a beach in Alabama, hell, I'll go there with you.
Right.
Right. But when the person is distressed about whatever their reality is, that's when I find it more difficult. And I assume that other people do too, but I would just put that out there.
Yeah, and I'd love to just kind of I think it's a great point, right? And I think what we can do then is also I think that's an opportunity sort of more mirroring and validating. So you don't necessarily have to you're entering the reality in a different way. And I think it's more about saying, I'm so sorry you're so upset. I can tell, right? So it's more a validating of emotions, I think can be valuable at that time. So so that you see what the person is feeling, she's going to feel heard and seen. So I think at those moments, you don't need to be living that reality with her, no, but we're accepting it in a different way. And I think if we can accept the emotion and mirror that, yeah, oh, I'm so sorry, yes, this is frustrating, yeah, this is really frustrating, or kind of mirroring that can be a helpful way of accepting what she's offering and building on it, but not having to live there, essentially, right? So
Right.
I think mirror emotion could be a helpful tool for that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I also wonder how my mother lives in an assisted living facility. Do you do this work with groups of the caregivers that are with the residents day to day? I had some of the leaders at the facility that she's at, and I think this is true other places too, know what's supposed to happen. But the folks that are in there day to day, helping with the activities of daily living and everything else, I don't know that they get that same level of support. So I just wonder if that's something that your project does.
Yes, we do. Yeah. And you're right, because often, I mean, I think there's such quick turnover sometimes for some of those positions, and the training isn't always in place but yes, we do offer that for professional caregivers.
Great. We actually just had a question about that too, Anne-Marie, in the chat, about how do caregivers connect with Project Present, and do you have resources for healthcare providers as well?
Yes, yeah, I would be happy to share. I realized I didn't have that. You guys were my guinea pigs with my slides today, but I didn't have slides really with any of my information. So I will be, maybe Natalie, if you could help me, I would be happy to share all my information, and please reach out with any questions, if it's even personal or professional, whatever. And I'd be happy to connect
Yeah, absolutely. Anne-Marie, if you want to just send me, the best information
Sure.
for you on that, and then I will be sure to send out a follow-up email with everybody on the call with that information, as well as the slides and the recording too.
Okay.
So we have another question as well. How many sessions do caregivers typically attend? And do you provide advice for when some caregivers are happy to try and use the improv, but others in the family may not be?
Well, so it depends really on, there used to be it's kind of evolved and changed the trainings with COVID, of course, that kind of changed things. But some people can come to there's ones that I offer that are short one. And like I said, the purpose of getting introduced and then inviting them to be a part of like the group ongoing. So people really have control over obviously how much they want to attend and be a part. But the trainings, if you signed up for a training, you would either go, sometimes there's 4-week trainings, there's one and done. So we have kind of different things that we offer. But I always want to have in place that there's then support once you're done with that, because I think that's the key. And you learn the most through other caregivers. Those are the people that will definitely teach you the most, is other people that are living and having these experiences that you're having. So that's the key. I think was there another part of that question?
Yeah. The other part was, do you have advice for when some caregivers are happy to try and use these tactics in the improv, but others in the family may not be?
Yeah, that's trying to think of a situation. Well, I think it's just also offering, like, some of these tools might not feel right for you. So it's kind of, I always just recommend, as long as someone is getting a tool, a strategy, something new that they can use to be a little bit more effective at what they're doing. I'm not saying you have to go do all of these things, because that's a little bit overwhelming anyway. So I like to sort of throw it out there as, try what works for you. Just if people are getting new tools and strategies to care for self as well as care for other, I think that can only improve the situation. So navigating the situation, allowing people to kind of, pick and choose, if you will, what that will work for them in that situation.